This week on Capital Report, a new report on the health of the state's pension funds.
I think we've shown that we can manage our health. We can do it with discipline.
That's the fact, Jack! That's a fact, Jack!
Connecticut showing a strong investment performance.
I think we have made incredible progress as a state.
You want to hear the crazy thing? I know it doesn't feel like it, but we're making progress.
Plus, a new report calling for big changes to Connecticut State Colleges and Universities.
We're not quite sure why they want to shrink the system.
Don't make everything smaller. I don't want to generalize that way. Tighter.
Also, the Connecticut Democratic Party gets a new leader.
I think he'll be a very credible spokesman for the party.
He's always kind of partial to Roy Rogers, actually.
And could Connecticut one day become part of Canada?
Canada? We're going over the border to Canada for some French fries and gravy shrimp.
Pass the poutine. Cap Report starts now. Welcome to Cap Report. I am Tom Dutchick, and we are so glad you're spending part of this Sunday morning alongside the Power Panel. The great mayor of Bloomfield, Connecticut, Danielle Wong, is with us.
Tom.
Coach Joe Arasimowicz, former Speaker of the House.
Game day.
Liz Karanowicz, Republican strategist, is with us.
Good morning.
Johnny McKinney, the Jelly of the Month Club of Capital Report.
Raspberry.
The gift that keeps on giving, Johnny Mac. All right, guys, let's go. Hey, Governor Lamont gathered with his state treasurer and comptroller last week to take a little bit of a victory lap. The reason? The much improved fiscal health and long-term outlook for Connecticut's pension fund for retired state workers. During the 2024 fiscal year, assets in the fund grew by $2.7 billion, pushing the fund's ratios to their highest level since 2003. This progress being made will help the state increase funding for more essential services, but don't pop that champagne cork yet. Still a lot more to be done. Watch this.
We need to make sure that we protect this culture and never allow ourselves to return to the habits of ignoring our obligations. Connecticut really rose to the occasion and continues to do that in making this a priority.
I think it's important for the people of Connecticut to know how this impacts you. That 55% funded ratio is less debt for our kids to be paying down. $18 billion less debt we will pay because of that ratio and our contributions between now and 2049. $18 billion. That's a lot of money.
Danielle, good news. Happy days are here again, apparently, right?
It is absolutely good news. This is great news for the state, great news for workers, retirees. Let's be clear, for the last 7 or so decades, we haven't done really well with investing in pensions. And so in the last decade, we've seen a lot of progress being made. One, we've made our contributions annually, so we had that discipline. 2, we've made extra contributions, started under the 2017 Malloy, kind of that discipline carrying it over. And then 3, smart investments. And so I am super excited that Treasurer Russell has taken that discipline to the next level, carried over to his predecessors, and making sure that we continue to prioritize this, continue to have that discipline, and free up some money to do other really critical things.
There's more to be done, though.
Listen, with all due respect, the Connecticut is still ranked 48th in the country. So I'm not quite sure where the pats on the back are coming from, and frankly, Dan Malloy had nothing to do with this. It was Joe Arasimowicz and the rest of the leaders that dragged him into this conversation because of how derelict he had been as governor. And the reality is, we had put $8 billion down, and it took $1 billion off the bill. So we have to be honest with people about what we're doing, and I think it goes to the point that the guardrails are working, but our government is still way too expensive.
Yeah. And if you really go back, and John knows this very well too, the legislature for many years would manipulate the numbers when it came to pension contributions because the benefits were so rich. Credit to the CBEC labor unions for negotiating fairer benefits the state can afford. But now we have to make the payments, and we're also making up for almost 30 years of lack of payments or juggling the number around to inflate what our rate of return was. And you're absolutely right. Both the current treasurer and the previous treasurer looked at our investments because they were underperforming. So if we can continue to make the investments, extra money, pay it down, and have good quality returns, we're on a different footing because every CEO knows what our liability number is.
Well, Liz mentioned those guardrails, and during that news conference, Governor Lamont was asked about how all of this plays into the state's fiscal guardrails as he looks ahead to his February budget address in the opening of the session. Take a listen to this.
It's fair to say we're going to have an honestly balanced budget. We haven't done that for 30 years in this state until the last 6 or 7 years. I don't want a lot of assumptions that just create a hole in the out years. I want to make sure that we have a balanced budget for our kids going forward as well. You know, I'm a little surprised sometimes when people say, we'll spend a lot more now and we'll figure out how to pay for it later. I think that's the type of credit card mentality that got this state into big problems over the last 30 years, and I'm not going to let it happen again.
Strong statement. Hey, so Senate Republicans followed up on all of this and released a statement titled "Spending Discipline Works," and they said, quote, any Democrat who say they want to adjust or tweak or update our common sense fiscal guardrails in 2025 also want to raise our state's taxes. It's as simple as that, Johnny McKinney, right?
It is as simple as that. Fiscal discipline does work. Look, I think the governor's right in talking about having an honestly balanced budget. I think he's going to have about an extra $900+ million. I don't think they're going to need to tweak or adjust the guardrails in order to come in with a good balance for the state of Connecticut. But just on the previous conversation, it is good news that we've made progress. But, you know, as our friend Jeffrey Sonnenfeld would point out, if our treasurer had invested 60-40 into the market, we'd have an extra $2 billion we could have paid off. It's a historic year in the market. And we're still incurring future obligation debts through pension and state employee benefits. So there's a long road to go. And I think the governor's right. I think the Republicans in Steve Harding and Vin Candelora will be partners with him to make sure there's no time to change the discipline that we've imposed. Continue down.
And yet, Mayor, this Connecticut Conference of Municipalities is urging them to tweak their guardrails to give you more money in an election year.
Yeah.
Only to you.
I don't know how they got combined.
But look, I think both can be true. We can still really be disciplined in paying down our liability and making sure our pensions are strong and we support workers as they approach retirement. When it comes to the guardrails, though, it has done some really good things for the state. But I think people are still hurting. And to Liz's point, it hasn't translated into those pocketbook issues, not verbatim, but does this guardrail, does this excess, does this rainy day fund impact the quality of life for every resident in Connecticut? We are still, again, one of the top states in the country that have this huge wealth gap. How is this going to support that? How is this going to support the working families, the working class getting on their feet? It's not talking about giveaways. It's not talking about making sure that, you know, people have exorbitant amounts of salaries and these big, you know, union contracts, but it's talking about making sure that we can support housing crisis, transportation issues, making sure our educational system is strong. We haven't done a good job with that, and I hope the governor will take a balanced approach, not as it relates to the bottom line, but making sure the issues on the table get a balanced access to attention.
Okay, so speaking of CCM, last week mayors and first selectmen from all across Connecticut headed to Mohegan Sun to talk about what sort of economic impact the federal elections could wind up having on Connecticut. Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, our friend Joe DeLong put together the convention to talk about everything from defense manufacturing to fintech to how Trump's immigration policies could impact our economy here at home. Watch this.
It's about approach, what we do in local government. We can't control what's going on in the federal government, whether it's positive or negative. All we can do is portray a positive image to our residents, look to get things done, create economic development opportunities, and don't get discouraged because there's a lot of obstacles in government.
Population growth in this country, and in Connecticut specifically, is largely dependent on immigration. That's where it's coming from. So the continued economic success that we've seen bubbling up in Connecticut over the last couple of years may well be dependent on the availability of immigration to fuel our labor markets.
Well, as I said to Danielle, you know, it's a municipal election year in the off year, and the mayors and first selectmen are where the rubber meets the road in the community. We'll see what the impact they have on the last election has on them.
Yeah, I used to say when I was on the town council, it'd take me about 45 minutes to get through the grocery store. When I became a state rep, I could run in there and get milk and leave. The local issues are what people are talking about. It affects them each and every day. The immigration one is an interesting point because if you look at the Congressional Budget Office, their latest report really shows that immigration has fueled our economy, and why I know people don't feel it, but our economy really is doing well in comparison to other countries. And the president has to understand when he changes some of these thresholds, how he's going to handle immigration, he has to consider the economy because it could destroy a state like Connecticut. And John, you know, we do 7-year swings around here. We're good for 7 years. 7 years, we start going back down. 2017 budget, 2024, we have to be careful in all the policies we pass.
Well, there's so many ways the new Trump administration can affect all of the states. But for Connecticut, where's Trump going to be on nuclear submarines and the AUKUS agreement?
Yep.
Where's he going to be on the SALT tax, right? Which is a tax increase on rich people. Is he going to undo that and give the rich people the tax cut? Like that Chris Murphy wants to give? Who knows? We'll have to see. But in terms of immigration, look, you know, the immigrants who are coming into this country and working hard aren't the issue.
Yeah.
The issue is the people who've come here illegally and committed violent crimes while they're here. And so the issue for the mayors and for selectmen is, are you going to stand in the way of getting those people out of the country? We just saw Mayor Eric Adams in New York stand up and say, I'm going to work with Donald Trump because there are criminals in my city who are harming people and hurting the image of New York City. Is Mayor Ellicott going to take the same position? We'll see.
When you're looking at the municipal election cycles as well, and just the impact of the federal government on your local economy and on our municipalities, you also look at education and you look at workforce development and training. And we know that Linda McMahon cares very much about workforce development and workforce training. We know these are places where she can have an impact as the Secretary of Education in making sure that places like this is one of our biggest issues. You talk to employers all over the state of Connecticut, workforce development and training is a significant issue. And by the way, when in the last Trump presidency, we saw opportunity zones and things like that really flourish. So I think there are opportunities here and we have to have an open mind. And Joe, credit to you. You have really talked about that over the last month or so, that we have to have an open mind and come to the table and have conversations about places where we can agree and where we know that the federal government can have a positive impact.
Yeah, I think if we don't move forward and agree and find that common ground on these very critical issues, we all fail.
Yep.
All right, guys, up next on Cap Report, a new report looks at Connecticut's regional state universities, what it found, and, well, why the faculty isn't happy about that. When we get back, don't go away. Let's chat, everybody. New report from the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, gotta put the systems on there, is recommending some deep cuts to faculty, staff at Connecticut State Colleges and Universities. Among other sweeping changes, the organization was brought in by the state's Office of Policy and Management, that's OPM to McKinney, to get a hard look under the hood. A projected dip in enrollment is what has led to a slimmed down faculty. Union members not happy about it. They say tuition affordability is the issue. Watch this.
The only thing we know is that the Office of Policy and Management has been suggesting that the state not spend any more money on higher education and that we should just shrink. But we know perfectly well that the state has a huge amount of surplus money. Our rainy day fund is $4.1 billion, not million, billion dollars right now. We understand the fiscal guardrails limit what can be spent, but we think that with the correct political will, legislators can make those guardrails a little bit more flexible.
It will take time for each of us to digest, to hear from stakeholders, to evaluate which of the recommendations and on what scale and timeline are in the interest of CSCU.
Well, there's another report to gather dust on lawmakers'
Put it on
shelves.
a shelf.
Shelves, huh?
I mean, I'm sitting here incredulous to the fact that we're, again, spending the surplus for what, like the 100th time in the last 12 months? And the idea that one-time revenue means nothing to people in charge of Connecticut's higher education system. I am absolutely incredulous to this. The reality is, if you look at what they've done at Central, and the way they've aligned their staff and the management of what they've done at Central, they are one of the only state universities that's running a well-oiled machine in the black. And what they ought to be doing is going in and talking to the folks who are running Central and saying, what can we do to mirror that at the CSCU level and in the rest of the colleges and universities to make the universities affordable and effective for the students? Period. End of story.
And I think the report does play a role in this. The legislators, the executive branch, they're going to look at it. Maybe they adopt some things, maybe they don't. But I do think it's sounding the alarm at our institutes of higher learning here in the state of Connecticut. Connecticut, tuition is going through the roof. The students are suffering. They're now graduating with years and years and years of bills. We have to change that structure. We would like the faculty to be partners in that, and I think if you get the right people around the table, it can be. Look at the report and come up with a plan, but can't keep going to the surplus.
And just quickly, too, where are the Board of Regents on this? They have a responsibility as well, and they need to be part of the conversation and holding the administration accountable.
Danielle, how do we solve it?
Well, we're looking for the state to really come in and solve it and figure out what this looks like, because what I can tell you for the municipalities and the cities and the towns on the ground, we need to understand how to push those trajectories. Are they going to workforce development? Is there capacity to go to higher ed? If it is, how do we set them up with the resources to afford that, the state tuition and those rates? And so if the state doesn't figure out in that middle level, then the local public schools are going to struggle with how we build our curriculum up and to put these students where they want to go.
Right, and I know people watching understand this, but for the woman we just heard, maybe we need to repeat that. If you spend $1 billion on programs from the surplus this year, that's $1 billion you're obligated to spend next year, the year after, and the year after. Look, the legislature used to have a program review and investigation committee. It was bipartisan. They used to investigate these things and propose ideas. There's some talk that there's going to be a new oversight committee. I hope they bring that back. I hope it's bipartisan, and let's get the legislators involved in trying to fix some of these things.
Yeah, guys. Up next on Capital Report, a new leader for Connecticut's Democratic Party. It's not Eric Simowitz. How deep should we read into the governor's pick? We'll discuss when we get back. Don't go away. Here you go. Flex yourself. Well, during Thanksgiving week, Governor Lamont, full of turkey and stuffing, announced that Danbury Mayor Roberto Alves will take over as chairman of Connecticut's Democratic Party. Alves will take over for longtime chair Liz's friend Nancy DiNardo. DiNardo is expecting to step down when her term ends in January. Alves had a meteoric rise in Danbury politics. He won a city council seat in 2019, then won the mayoral election in 2023. Alves has been the Democratic Party treasurer. He's been a big fan of the Nedster, who is still pondering running a third term. Watch this.
I like him. I think Roberto Alves is a good man with an amazing story who's had a successful career in the private sector, now a very well-regarded mayor. I like somebody who's speaking on behalf of the Democratic Party, not just to speak as a policy person or a politico, but somebody who's actually had to get the job done. And I think he'll be a very credible spokesman for the party.
Well, let's take a whack at this. Everyone in Connecticut Democrat politics is like, I got to drive to Danbury to see the guy? I'm not driving to Danbury.
Listen, first of all, Nancy DiNardo, my hat's off to you. I have always enjoyed having Nancy on the other side of the aisle, and congratulations to her, obviously, on a job well done.
She'll be missed.
Much to my chagrin, obviously. Look, state parties around the country have suffered a great deal since the changes in campaign finance law, and I won't go pontificate on that for 10 minutes. I could, but the reality is state parties are a relic of the past. They are not the power broker, not in Connecticut, not anywhere that they used to be. They don't have the financial resources. They are no longer really the place where people go for that blessing that they used to be. And so I think really, as the governor said, this is somebody who he believes is serving as a spokesman more than anything.
Yeah, and I think the story and the way the governor tells it too is exactly right. It's a local guy. He has a community that is very diverse. He has poverty, he has some high wage earners, but he's out there talking to people each and every day. And I think that's what we have to do more as the Democratic Party, engage in these conversations, really understand where people are coming from. And I can't think of a better person to do it. I think the governor made a great pick.
I'm going to do a little contrast with that. I think absolutely, the interactions that I've had with the mayor has been very pleasant. He won a historically Republican city in a long time, so I have no doubt and ability that he will be able to do the job, and I look forward to working with him. With that being said, I do believe that there was a missed opportunity on the ground level to bring the Democratic Party together. I've talked to a lot of DTC or town committee chairs on the Democratic side, and they feel slighted. They didn't know this was coming, and they are the generals on the ground in the field that are the worker bees, that know the communities, that get the vote out. And I think it was a missed opportunity to bring and to unify the Democratic Party in Connecticut in a much needed space where we see other towns, going a little purple and red. But I have no doubt that, again, the new chair will really hit the ground running.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, Governor Ned Lamont is the head of the Democratic Party in the state of Connecticut. And if you're looking for someone other than Governor Lamont, it's Senator Chris Murphy, right? They've been driving the Connecticut Democratic Party, and the governor drives the state. It's much more exciting to be the party chairman when you're out of office, because that's when your voice can go after the incoming administration. So look, the governor gets to pick his person. He picked a good one. He trusts him. That's a big part of the deal.
All right, guys, so hey, how do you feel about ice hockey, Tim Hortons, and poutine? Well, next on Cap Report, could Connecticut become the next Canadian Providence? We'll explain when we come back, okay?
Syrup, eh?
So last week, while you guys were all digesting your turkey, Newsweek reported that New York State Senator Liz Krueger floated the idea of New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont could secede from the United States and join the Great White North, Canada, to avoid President Trump's return to office. Krueger believes a Trump administration crackdown on immigration and mass deportations puts Connecticut and other sanctuary states with sanctuary cities at risk of losing federal funds. Krueger said basically everyone in these states are progressive Democrats and would fit in pretty well with the political philosophy of at least most Canadian elected officials there, okay? Republicans care to weigh in, huh?
It's nice to know that a state senator who took sworn oath to uphold the Constitution wants to violate the very Constitution. What an idiot.
What an idiot. And look, I love Canada. I'd live there someday, sure. But isn't this what we criticize the other side for? Isn't this the same thing, and now we're out there doing it? We are the United States. We have to work together.
And Danielle has never had poutine. Didn't even know what poutine was.
And I will never. No, thank
What?
you.
We'll give you a pardon for not knowing what poutine is. How about that?
More lacrosse is good with me, but we're not going to Canada for it. I'll tell you.
All right, guys, grab your cheese curds. I'm Tom Dutchick. We'll see you next week for the mayor.
Coach! And the